Feagins. So I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, or a town outside of that, and I went to undergrad at Mercer University, which is a small Baptist college actually in Macon, Georgia. I decided to go to Mercer because at that time I wanted to go to medical school, and so there was Mercer or Emory in Georgia that had medical schools, and I felt like if I went to a school that already had medical school, then I would be, more in a better position to get a supplement, as if I went to undergrad there. So anyway, Mercer offered me a full scholarship, so I went to Mercer and started out there. And I was a biology major, of course, and along with the pre-med track, but it wasn't until my senior year, I believe, that I took a microbiology course. And first of all, I have to say this, I had already applied to medical school. I got accepted into medical school and all of that jazz, but then I took the microbiology course my senior year and I absolutely loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I might want to do research. And so I thought about the MD PhD program, but it was too late because I had already got accepted into the MD program. And if you want to do the MD PhD, that's a whole separate bag. You have to interview for that separately. So I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And so one of my advisors in undergrad suggested that I work at the CDC, like defer my medical school acceptance for 6 months and try to do some research. Because in undergrad, we didn't have, it was a small biology department. We didn't have research. And so I wasn't able to see if that was something that I wanted to do. So she suggested that I work at the CDC. She had some connections, and I actually got a job at the CDC the summer after I graduated. I started in September, I believe. I took a couple months off first, and then I started working at the CDC. And I worked on the anthrax in the anthrax vaccine research program. It was like right after the huge anthrax outbreaks that had happened. So I was so excited. I was like, I got there, I saw all these people, the BSL-4 labs, these spaces, so on. I was like, I want to do that, I want to work on it. But of course, I wasn't trained. And so they started me out with just a small project because I wasn't sure if I was even really going to be there that long. But make a long story short, 6 months at the CDC turned into 2 years. And that's when I finally realized that I really wanted to do research and not actually the medical aspect of things. I found that when I was at the CDC, I was more intrigued by what's, not treating people for what they have, but more of understanding what's going on in their body. So I really decided right then and there that whatever I did in grad school, it would be research on infectious diseases. So it was too late by this time. I think it might have been like, I don't know, it was after all of the grad schools were accepting applications that I all of a sudden decided that I wanted to go to grad school. And so another mentor, so at each stage I've always had some sort of mentor, even if it was not somebody on my committee or somebody that was advising me, I always had a mentor. So even at the CDC, I had a mentor. She was an African-American woman that she was an epidemiologist actually, and she would guide me through it. She's like, oh, you should do this, just be aware of what's going on in the field. And so I talked to her, and we would meet weekly, and I told her, I was like, okay, I really want to go to grad school, but I think it's too late. I think I missed the deadline, but I don't want to stay here at the CDC anymore. And what she did was she came back and with this pamphlet of NIH-sponsored programs, that were taking students for different sorts of things. And one of the programs or pamphlets in that stack that she brought me was BT, or not BT prep, but just prep in general. And so I probably applied to them all because the deadline hadn't passed for any of them. So I didn't know how competitive this program was. I didn't know if I would even be worthy of this program. So I just applied to every single one that I could. And I pretty much got an interview. Some of them would accept me without having a formal interview, and I didn't like that because I wanted to make sure that the school was the right fit to me. But Virginia Tech and a couple of others actually invited me out, and so I think Virginia Tech was the last prep program that I interviewed from, and I already knew kind of that I wanted to come here because I emailed Dr. Smith. He probably doesn't remember this. I was like, oh, I want to work in infectious diseases, and I was so enthused about it, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to hook you up with Dr. Ming. I was like, Dr. Ming? I was like, okay. So I was really excited about coming here and meeting Dr. Ming, and I got here, and and everybody was so welcoming. The prep family then was so welcoming. I felt like this is the place for me, just off of the welcoming aspect of it. I mean, they gave you a tour of the campus. I fell in love with the campus. At that time, oh gosh, I can't even remember her name. I'm going to shoot myself. What the ombudsman, what was her name?
Oh, Marilyn Kershaw.
Marilyn,
You know, she was here. She was here 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
we had
yeah.
lunch with her. Yeah, with Siobhan and Nikki. We went to lunch with her.
So I met Marilyn, and she was just so gung-ho about Virginia Tech. There was nothing but positive things to say about Virginia Tech, and I was like, oh my, about the prep program and about Virginia Tech's grad school in general. And so that was great, all in itself. Then I met with Dr. Ming, and Dr. Ming was great. He actually took me to his lab and said, talk to my lab members, they'll tell you, he's like, I don't want you to be biased about what I'm saying about myself, so you talk to some of the grad students in the lab, and everybody had nothing but positive things to say, and I already knew, I was like, this is the lab for me. But I did interview with one other person, and which was a great lab too, but I wasn't that interested in the research, which is really important to me, and I was really interested in Dr. Ming's research. And so I told Dr. Smith that I wanted to work in Dr. Ming's lab, and he was like, great, you're in. I was so excited. I was like, okay. I was very happy, and so I was formally accepted into the prep program, I believe in 2005, and I immediately started working in Dr. Ming's lab, and took off, I think. By the end of my first prep year, I had already submitted a publication. So my first paper actually happened while I was in the prep program. And it was, I think it's the most compelling paper because everybody always remembers that project. I won't talk about it, but everybody always remembers that project. So anywhere I go, I always tell people that that project I did while I was funded by prep, and it was a great experience. And so I went on to finish that, finish my work in Dr. Ming's lab. It took me about 5 years. I was supposed to graduate in 4.5 years, but it ended up taking me 5 years. But it was great because 5 years, 5 papers. I published a paper every year, which I'm very proud of, and that made me very, I think, attractive to postdoc positions, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do when the time came for me to leave Dr. Ming's lab. I teeter-tottered because I really want to do research, but I don't know that I like the PI aspect of things. I don't like, although Dr. Ming is a great PI, he's a wonderful mentor, he's exceptional, he always says you should work for yourself, not for me, so there was no pressure. He didn't micromanage, we met with him only monthly. I know a lot of people try to have lab meetings more than that, but we met only monthly, and you would go to Dr. Ming only when you have a problem or needed advice on something. So I love that. So for the most part, you were on your own, but you worked for yourself. I wanted those papers, the papers got out. He gave me an idea, or I would think of an idea, and I would make sure that idea was implemented and followed through, and I got papers out of it, which was exactly, and I learned so much. But so when it came down to choosing a postdoc, I just had no idea what to do. I wanted more experience, first of all, so I still don't know what I want to do. I'll preface this by saying that even though I'm a postdoc, I don't know that I want to be in academia forever. But I thought that the postdoc would be beneficial to me because I worked on hepatitis E virus in grad school, which is a small positive strain virus. There's all types of viruses out there, and I felt like if I'm supposed to be an expert in viruses, then I kind of need to work with a different virus. So I went, so for my postdoc, I want to do something a little different. So now I work on Ebola virus, which I don't know if you guys are aware of. It's a highly fatal disease. It kills 90% of people, and I think the fact that the most important thing that you should know about it is that there is not a vaccine. So if you get this, you're pretty much dead. And if you haven't been up to your current events, there's actually an outbreak going on right now in Uganda, which makes us really happy. I mean, because it shows that the disease is still relevant and it can be used as a bioweapon, which is another reason why we're interested in researching this disease. But I thought that would be a great opportunity for me to choose the postdoc that I'm in now, because it's a negative strand virus. It's completely different than anything I did in grad school. And Dr. Ming's lab, I did a lot of pig work and a lot of manipulation of the virus genome-wise. But in my postdoc now, I do a lot of protein work, a little mass spec work, a little bit of everything. It's a lot, so I'm learning so much. And so I've been pretty happy there, I think. And I was hesitant to talk about my research, because the research that I'm doing actually is, I've been there, I think, a little over a year now. And I was kind of upset because in grad school, I had already published my first paper in a year. And as a postdoc, I was expecting to have a paper published by now. And so I was troubled by this. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm behind the curve. What am I going to do? And my research that I'm doing is pretty complex, and I'm trying to figure out a particular mechanism. And I just about a month ago had an epiphany, and this paper is going to be published in Nature, which I'm really excited about. I know, I'm thoroughly, so the hard work is paid off, because my boss was getting a little antsy. And once we finish this out, we are pretty confident that we'll be able to submit this to Nature, not Nature, to PNAS or something like that. So I'm really excited about that. But being a postdoc is so very hard and so very stressful. It's not like being in grad school, where you don't necessarily have to publish. You're just there to learn, think independently, and and do what you love if research, concerning your research. But as a postdoc, you're there to publish, and publish more, and also start grooming yourself to potentially have your own lab one day. And I don't know that is something that I want to do, because I look at my bosses at Mount Sinai, and they are always on edge. I'll just put that nice. They're always on edge, and I don't know that I want to spend the rest of my life on edge. I want to, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love what I do, but I love doing what I do on my own terms. So it's going to be hard for me to figure out where I'm going to go after this, because I want to be able to train other minorities. Like my goal, I actually have two. I thought I wanted to kind of be a consultant, if you will. If an outbreak was to occur, I want people to be able to contact me, and I'd be able to give them advice. I don't even know if that's possible. I don't even know if that's an actual job title, but that's kind of what I wanted to do. And then the second thing is, but I really love mentoring other people, especially minorities. There's not enough African Americans in research, and I really wanted to kind of have my own lab, maybe at like a HBCU or something small, and kind of groom them to take over the world. I mean, I didn't think that I would, be where I am at, but I just want to make sure that I give back and help other people with aspirations that are similar to mine achieve their goals. So those are the things that I want to do, but I don't know that would be feasible, and actually the amount of work that would go into kind of setting that up. But that's where I'm at right now. And as far as being a minority in this whole scheme of things, I actually have not had any problems. I mean, I know that the only time that my race factor into anything that I actually considered it is when I was doing my postdoc, or started applying for postdocs. I did not want the labs to know that I was black. I didn't want them to only hire me because I was black. So I made a conscious effort to make sure that they were interested in me before they brought me out. I wanted them to be like, oh yeah, we're happy with your work, and we think you'll be a great asset to the team, before they invited me out. I didn't want anybody to be have me in their lab because they get funding, because you can get funding. If they find out that you're African American or any sort of minority, they can apply for supplements and all that jazz just for you. So I didn't want that. I wanted to make sure that I would be able to make it in this field based off of my credentials, all the hard work that I did in grad school, and not because I was African American. So that was very important to me. And I think that's the only time that I really considered my being a minority in this thing, and also of course when I went through the transition with my hair, I didn't know how my department was gonna handle that, because my department, there's two African American girls in my department, and I always feel now as a postdoc actually that I need to perform better, if not 10 times better than my counterparts, because I feel like there's always a watchful eye on what we're doing. So I do try to be a little better, but I didn't know how receptive they were going to be to my hair, because to my hair situation, I came in with straight long hair, and I fit in. I mean, I could fade in between the scenes, but then I cut it off, I highlighted it, and then I did this whole thing. But everybody has been pretty receptive, even the head of my department, who's an amazing guy, Dr. Peter Palasi, who is like the godfather of influenza. If you want to know anything about flu, he will tell you. He's a great guy. But even he said, "Oh my gosh, I like what you've done to your hair." So that made me feel at ease, and so I've been pretty fortunate. It's just that right now I just have to figure out what I want to do with myself. But I plan on probably finishing up at Mount Sinai within the next year and a half. After I get these papers out, there's 2 papers that I'm working on that are probably Nature and or PNAS or something like that worthy. So I'm gonna get those out, and then I'm probably gonna head somewhere to the West Coast, just because I wanted to go to the West Coast in the beginning. And so I'll probably head out there and try to figure something out. But I need to start focusing on really what the next phase of my life is, and I don't know what that is yet.
Okay, so one of the things, very good start. I missed the beginning, but so one of the things you mentioned, you being in this room like these rascals here. So it's one of the things we like to ask folks would be, so you've had 2 main mentors now, your Mount Sinai mentor, and so have you had a chance to decide what makes a good mentor, what makes a good interaction with a mentor?
Absolutely, but because I'm on camera, we're gonna have to keep this PC.
Oh no, that's my point. Yeah. I mean, so don't give names. Sure. But it's your impression of what makes a good mentor.
Sure. So my Dr. Ming and my current mentor are like night and day. So it was definitely interesting because, as I mentioned before, Dr. Ming was very laid back. If I had a problem, like we met, as far as research goes, once a month. I don't know if that's like standard, but I loved it. We met like once a month.
That's in violation of prep rules.
We met once a month, and of course it would take. Yeah. See, that's ridiculous. That's what we're doing now. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. No, we in grad school we definitely just met once a month. Of course, we would be there all day, but I was okay with that because it was once a month. And Dr. Ming's lab was pretty huge. I think at the time it was like 11 or 12 of us. So just imagine 12 people that's supposed to be giving an update on your research for like 10 minutes. And that would turn into 3-4 hours. Like, oh my gosh, and it goes on and on and on. But actually, of course, lab meetings are great. You learn about what your coworkers are doing, and then you give them advice if they're having problems. Sometimes you get advice for yourself. But just the laid back, Dr. Ming was very laid back. I like the fact that he would always say, "You work for yourself." He would always say, "I'm established. I don't care what." He said, "I have my papers. Check my PubMed. Just go to PubMed and you'll see Dr. Ming has plenty of papers. He's not out here trying to get more papers." So he was like, "You're working for yourself." He was like, "I'm here to help you," and I love that about Dr. Ming. And if anything, if I were to have a lab, I would definitely adopt that. But there are some things about my current lab that I will also implement. I don't think I would do the once a week thing because now we do meet once a week, and I'm like, oh gosh, I dread it every week. We have to talk about, so everybody, since we're doing the once a week thing, it's one person going, of course, not everybody. And I think I would have a mixture of the two. I would definitely take on Dr. Ming's laid backness. I mean, I guess it depends on, I guess my 2 PIs are in different places though, so I guess it really depends on where you are actually, because I guess Dr. Ming could be laid back because he is established And my current PI, well, I think he's established, but he's still go. He's still anxious to have those papers. And I didn't realize that in the beginning. I thought that since he was already an associate professor that he might be more laid back, but he still produce. And so that comes with weekly lab meetings. He's always, so what do you have for me? He's definitely more in tune with what his postdocs and the grad students are doing. So if I could choose, I think it would be a happy medium between the two. I think I would, I guess it just would really depend on where I'm at with my career. But ultimately, I would definitely like to take on Dr. Ming's, I guess, way of managing grad students, because it made you really want to work more. Knowing that you were working for yourself with no pressure, you tend to produce more, I feel, and are more happy to do so. And if things go wrong, you don't feel like you have to take bad news to somebody. Dr. Ming would be like, oh, well, that's science. But as a postdoc, that's not acceptable. They were like, oh, it didn't work, so what do you have for me? I'm like, oh, okay, nothing at the moment. I mean, but it's short. So you have two very different people. So, but I've grown to realize that and accept the positive out of both situations. But I think that in the long term, I would definitely have a lab that's more geared towards making your grad students feel like they want to come to work every day. Because if you're hassling your grad students or even your postdocs all the time, it kind of backfires. You kind of don't want to do what you're supposed to be there to do. I feel like obviously we're researchers or we're postdocs, and we want to give you papers and give you data. But when you're continually hassling somebody about it, it doesn't help the situation out. And so I've had to kind of adapt to that. Of course, I'm still going to do my work because that's what I love to do. But you have to strike some sort of balance, I feel, there. So it just really depends.
So do you feel so this is very good. I think as you develop, you're familiar with this thing about attention versus neglect.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you're getting enough attention, or do you feel you don't need a lot of attention? So there's like you're saying, there's a balance there.
Yeah.
Well, how can you manage as a mentor? You know, now you're going to be a mentor. You're a mentor in a way here. How do you manage that?
So I think the key to being a great PI is knowing what each individual needs. So this is my thing. You know, I think that's great. Sometimes you have students or maybe postdocs that need constant attention, and so you give them that. But then you have people that don't. They're okay with you give them a project, and they'll carry it out, and they'll only come to you when there's a problem. And so in which case, you're laid back and you don't really hassle them that much. So as a PI, I think it's your job to actually realize that in the beginning and cater to everybody's individual needs. And I don't think it's hard to do. If you have a total of 10 people, or maybe you only have 2 people, I think that it's still possible. It's not that hard to do. A part of being a good PI is, of course, being an expert, being able to do all the administrative work, getting the money, but you also have to be a good people person.
Yeah.
You really have to understand that people are different and that you can't manage one person the same way that you manage another. So I think that's, so as a mentor, I think that people should probably, I think that that's lacking sometimes. And so I think that if I were to be a mentor, I would understand that. And and you can easily see, like, and so right now we have kids that rotate. And in the BMBS program here, you don't rotate, but in Mount Sinai, you have kids that rotate. And you can tell those that come in there and they're just fine. You give them a project and they're just fine. Oh, I'm doing this. They'll check in with you. But then you have the others that you have to hold their hand. And so you realize that you have to go there. Be like, okay, well, did you accomplish this today? Do you need help planning out this next experiment? Do you want me to check over it just to make sure that you're okay? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with, just people are different. It takes people longer or to get into their groove before they're able to be on their own. But it's worth a PI or advisor recognizing that and then catering to their individual needs. That's a part of their development. You can't expect, so the whole point of grad school, there's many points of grad school, but one of them is to ensure that your student is able to one day think independently. So as a part of your job as a PI is to get them there. And so if you have to give them attention or more guidance, then you do that. Or if you feel like your student is doesn't really need that, then you back off, but just check on them as time goes on. So I think that it's a very delicate balance, and it depends on the student or postdoc for that matter.
So the other thing about the, and so we know alumni, we know you, and she so I know that for a long time you didn't show up for prep activities or wait, but no, that's not bad. That's good. Bianca does that too, right? No, except she wants money. so you walked a lot. So what would you say to these new folks or the ones here? Because you spend long hours doing things, you know. Yes. I mean, you don't want to talk about your research, but I know that you work a lot, you know. I mean, you come here as an athlete and all of that. So what would you say a good graduate student commitment should be in terms, just remove the mental out of it? How much personal time do you need to, how do you get to succeed as a grad student?
Well, everybody's definition of success is different, Dr. Smith.
Yeah. No, yours. Well, you're our guest, you're our speaker. We're looking for your definition. Yeah.
What did I deem successful?
Yeah.
And this, of course, dictated how my work ethic was going to be in grad school. So what did I deem success? I wanted to be passionate about what I did. I was passionate when I started, and I want to be passionate when I finished. That's first off. If you don't like what you're doing, then you need not be doing it. You better rethink things. So for me, success was finishing and still being passionate about what I set out to do. That's first off. Secondly, success to me was coming in, being dependent on Dr. Ming's guidance. My success in the end was that I was able to develop my own ideas, think independently, and start thinking about those specific areas that I wanted to investigate myself. I didn't need to have Dr. Ming say, yeah, that's okay, or you might need to twerk this, or you're thinking too generally, you need to be more specific. So first off, I wanted to be passionate, I wanted to be able to think independently, and be able to form my own ideas so that when I got to my postdoc, I wouldn't need to have my hand being held. And third, and so because I wanted that, I worked really hard in the process of getting to that point. I attended journal clubs. To be not only current about what was going on in my field, but to see what else was going on, because you never know where your research is going to take you. So what articles you might deem important, your other colleagues may not. So it's very good that they have the chance to present papers at journal club, and you go in and you listen, you take notes, and you can think back, oh, I came across this at a journal club and this will help me. So I attended a lot of journal clubs. I studied a lot, because even though you think you're on top of things, there's always new stuff coming out. So you have to be really on top, and I'll touch on this in my presentation this afternoon. But so I did work hard, and I wanted papers because I knew that when I left here, that's how they were going to judge me. They weren't going to care about my dissertation. They want to know if I published. If they know that I published, then they know that I'm dedicated to my work, that I will pull it through, and that when they hire me, I'll give them that same dedication. So those were the three things that I think that I garnered as success. I wanted to be still passionate about what I was doing. I wanted to make sure that I thought independently, and that I was able to produce all these papers so that whomever hired me would know that I would be dedicated to what I was doing. And I think I accomplished all those things. So to me, I'm very successful. Even if I don't move a moment forward, I'm still happy with the success that I had in grad school. So, but for everybody, that's different. Some people just come to grad school because, well, I don't know why they come to grad school.
They want to be like you. All right, so the other thing, and I'll leave this, open it after this, I'll open it to people. It's very good, excellent. So, your lab, I think it's a little bit like every lab, I think the ones that Siobhan came to, Bianca, so I think if I remember right from XJ, you may have been the first. You want to eat some?
No, I'm listening.
Okay, you may have been the first, non-Asian, non-white in his lab. I don't know.
That's not true.
Is that right?
No,
Okay.
that's not true.
Okay. Yeah. So how does that work though with the lab interactions? What's your advice to other people in terms of lab dynamics? I mean, we spend a lot of time now in prep doing a workshop about mentoring a diverse lab. You know how people get. So what do you say to others whose labs are not as diverse as the XJ's was that you were in, and how
So
yeah, do you just go cower away somewhere? And just,
Dr. Ming's lab was pretty diverse. Before I came in, Dr. Ming actually had another African American student. She was a DVM/PhD student. So she got her degree in veterinary sciences before, at the same time as her getting her PhD. So he definitely had an African American student in his lab before I came in. But he also, Dr. Ming, of course, is Asian, and he definitely had Asian students. Actually, he only had 2 Asian students. He had, of course, Caucasian students, and he had Indian students. His lab was pretty diverse. When you look at some of the other labs around, Dr. Ming's lab was, I think, the most diverse within the vet school for sure. And so I don't think I don't know that he catered to a very diverse, I don't think he adopted a different style of managing just because he had a diverse group of people. He didn't, I don't think that.
no, it was not him. It's not about him. It's about your interaction.
Oh, my interaction?
Yeah. So you have different people in the lab.
Yeah.
That may or may not be like you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the
perfect.
question is about what how you can interact.
Okay. In that case, it was cool. Like I didn't have a problem. Actually, I loved it because I learned so much from my colleagues. Of course, we were definitely different. And I come into the lab, and Sumant, who was a PhD student that came in with me, he'd have Bollywood music on. So I'd be like, Sumant, what are we listening to today? And he'd share with me a little bit about his Indian culture. Or then one day I'd come in and Wei, who is a postdoc in Dr. Ming's lab, will have just microwaved his lunch, and it will smell so good. I'd be like, Wei, what did your wife cook for dinner, and what did you bring for lunch today? It would be amazing. And so we sit down and we talk about some of just random things like that. But the lab environment was awesome. I think we all got along very well. I think the one thing about Dr. Ming is that he made sure that whomever he let into his lab, that we all got along. He was very, very good about that. He would invite people in, that were potential candidates for the lab, whether it be postdocs or whether it be grad students. And then at the end of the day, he'd cuddle and he'd be like, so what did you think of them? Do you think they fit into Dr. Ming's lab? And he was not only looking for expertise or dedication, but he wanted to make sure that the lab dynamic was still flowing. He didn't want us in there hating one another. And so it didn't matter. And so for me, the diversity really didn't play an issue. It was great being in a diverse lab, of course, because I learned a lot about other cultures. And so they learned a lot about me because I might decide that I want to play Waka Flocka or something like that. Of course, they didn't know anything about it.
Leah doesn't know what that is. You know what that is?
It's rap. It's definitely bad rap, but I love it. And so I might play that. And so they'll learn a little bit about me, and I will learn a little bit about them. And so it was great. But I think a part of learning from a diverse group of people is being accepted. It depends on the people that you're actually around. Some people don't interact well with diverse groups. So I think it just depends on who you have in your lab. But I gained a lot of experience, and they were helpful to me. Everybody was very helpful because we worked as a team. Nobody was about themselves. If we needed help, then we give help. And so diversity wasn't really an issue, but I did enjoy it. And even my lab now is pretty diverse as well.
Oh, that's nice. No, I like it. I think bring some, give some.
Yeah,
bring
for
your
sure.
culture, they do some. Nice. And so
Can I interject something?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you emphasize that he only had the once a month meeting,
Yeah.
but you've been giving out clues ever since that he has a tremendous fingertip sense
Yeah.
of everything that was going on. And I think you said he was around the lab all the time. And so I think a lot of the difference in style here is just whether it's upfront direction that is aimed at people, or whether it's putting a whole package together and you only say something when you need to say something because an adjustment is needed, or because you think that somebody isn't grasping what you want, like even the comment about does this person fit? It's asking you for your input,
Yeah.
but it's also a very overt message about the climate that he wants to have. So I think there's an awful lot there that isn't necessarily said. And a student who was really unreceptive wouldn't even know that was going on.
Right.
But you've absorbed it all in your own descriptions of what a mentor should do. So for you, it fit really well.
It did.
You know.
So anyway, there's some Bud and Kim. So I mean, I think most of the things you've said kind of make me feel that you're ready to be a PI. I mean, I think you've learned a lot. And I know my own personal comment would be, being a postdoc for 1 year is not enough for you to decide you want to go home. I think give yourself 3 years.
It will have been 3 years by the time I finish these papers. It will have been 3 years.
So give yourself 3 years. At the end, you get a good paper published, you meet some nice scientists at meetings.
I don't know that I want to continue along this road. I don't know. I still have to think about it, Dr. Smith. I'm not quite sure. I just know I want to go to the West Coast. What I'll be doing on the West Coast, I'm not quite sure.
I have a lot of science there. Okay, so there's some issue I really want you to weigh in a little bit. So part of the thing that you probably did here that we pressured you and everybody in is to write some grant, to learn the skill of grant writing.
Right.
Is that intimidating to you, or that aspect you have sort of ignored? Because I think here you said people could write supplements and do stuff. But what do you think? Are we wasting time trying to get you folks to learn that skill?
No, it's actually something that you should start grooming yourselves to be able to do. And I actually loathe writing. I hate the part where you have to sit down at the end and summarize all your work, the manuscript, then you submit it. But as a PI, or if you're going to be in this field, it's absolutely crucial that you know how to write a grant. And so the only thing that I can say is that pay attention early on. Like Dr. Smith, at least for us while we was in prep, he kept pushing this F-32 thing.
F-31, yeah.
And the F-31, I get rid of it. But he kept pushing us to, okay, let's do this, let's write this. He kept bringing in people to show us how to do successful grant writing and things like that. And you should really pay attention. And it really is a very crucial part of your career. I wrote one. I did apply for the F-31, and I thought it was really good. Dr. Ming looked over the course and made sure that it was worthy of being submitted, but at the end of the day, it got rejected because they thought that my aims were too general and they didn't want to fund it. But it was a great learning process, and that's how I learned to think even more scientifically and more independently, because a lot of that came all of the ideas that were in that F-31, I think that's what it was called, came from me. But and even now, as I think about it, and I told you guys that my PI now, and even Dr. Ming, you could tell when grant writing was going on because they disappeared. Dr. Ming would disappear, his door would be closed for a long time, and now the same with my PI now, you know when grant writing is coming. And there's actually a postdoc in my lab who just got, I think, promoted. He got promoted to an assistant professor, but he's writing grants like crazy. He's not doing any research. He comes to work, he'll say hi, and then he'll go to a library and he'll push out grants. I think he's writing too. He's aiming for money, I think in R01, so he can establish his own lab. So grant writing is real. And if you don't have that skill to be able to express your research ideas and in a manner that is acceptable to NIH for sure, or any funding agency, you have to be able to make your research relevant. Why is your work worth funding? And why should we give you money to do this? I mean, they really want to know that your work is worth funding. There's plenty of people out there doing research, but what sets your research apart? Is it novel? I mean, what are we going to get from it? Is it translational? Especially for us being in the biomedical field, they want to know that what you're doing at the bench top translates into helping people. So that's very important. So you have to know what your audience is, but you have to know how to do that, but put all of that on paper and in a scientific manner, in a coherent manner. And I think I've learned that. I've read through a lot of the grants that Dr. Ming had. He would share them with us just to know how important it is, and to know what we were aiming for as a whole, what he was aiming for as a whole. And the same with my current lab. You can get a sense of his writing as well, and to know what he's aiming for. But of course, grant writing is the life and bread of what you do. If you don't have money, then you don't have a lab. So it's very important. So definitely pay attention when people come in and talk to you guys about. I think it's probably a little early to be thinking about it, but definitely when the opportunity comes, pay attention, because you might want to do an F31. I mean, even if you have funding, it's still good. Like Dr. Ming had money for me, but I wanted to take the initiative to write it myself. Even though it didn't get funded, I was happy because I did it. And now I knew how complicated, so that would get a sense of how complicated things would be when I established my own lab and actually have to, or before I leave, how complicated it would be to do an R01 or something like that. So definitely pay attention, because you're gonna need funding. If it's not as a grad student, definitely when you're trying to get ready to go out and establish your own lab.
But there are intermediate steps to get your feet wet, like the grad school
The
research
research
development programs and Sigma Xi and a bunch of those things. And many of those things where you write a one-page proposal. I mean, in many ways, it's harder to do a one-page proposal than a 15-page one. And it gets your feet wet, it gives you confidence if you bring the money in it. I mean, it's a really nice thing for your CV. It shows that progression you've been talking about and all that kind of thing. It's nowhere near as intimidating as doing the whole F31, although that's a great thing to do,
So as you know, there are things people say here that they don't say in their presentation. Is there something you want to tell us about yourself and science before your presentation today that these folks need to know as an advice to them?
Not really, because the presentation is really this afternoon about getting the most out of your grad school experience. I'm essentially giving them tips on how to make the best of the experience. So I think all that I thought about as a grad student, I put in the presentation, but there's not much else that I think you need to know.
But so how about the transition between high school and Mercer? How did you decide what major to take? Did you have any influence, family influence?
Yeah, my parents said I was going to be a doctor, so that's what I was going to do.
Oh, is that so? It was a parental, okay.
For sure. I don't think you guys know this, but I'm the first. Well, my aunt did go. She was a nurse, but besides that, I was the first person that went to college in a long time. Of course, everybody put all their eggs on my aunt going through nursing school, and so then many, 20 years passed, and then it was me. So they wanted me to, of course, become a doctor. So I said, oh, okay, I'll be a doctor. But I always loved biology in general, so it didn't matter whatever I was going to do in college. I definitely was going to be a biology major. But I know one thing, though, my transition to college was definitely interesting, because I I was pretty, I thought I was a big fish. So I won't even toot. I thought I was, smart and all of that. I had a 4.0. Oh, I was going to do just fine. And
You have done fine.
no, I mean, when I had been in high school, but then when I was going to college, I get there and I took my first, and I thought I was just gonna, I didn't think I needed to study. I glanced over the chapter, and I took my first biology exam, D. I think I got like 59, I don't even know what that was. I said, oh my God. I was about to drop out, called my parents. I said, oh Lord, I am not gonna be a doctor. I'm pulling 59s. That's an F. I don't know. But from that moment on, I was like, okay, we have a different ball game here. So of course I had to change my work ethic a lot. But other than that, I already knew that I wanted to be a biology major. I knew I was groomed to be a doctor, an MD.
Okay.
And it wasn't, like I said, until I got to my senior year that I contemplated getting a PhD. But I didn't have I did have a hard time transitioning. That first semester was a shocker. And that I had to buckle down and actually study in undergrad.
Okay. So during the undergraduate years, you didn't have any research. Did you have any mentors then that could say, this is an option for you?
That's what I'm saying. So nobody, of course I've always been fortunate to have some sort of mentor. Like I mentioned at the CDC, I had somebody there, and even in undergrad, of course you have your advisor there, but I actually had somebody outside of my advisor that was also in the biology department that knew that I absolutely loved biology. It didn't matter what we were talking about, as long as it wasn't about ecology or plants, I was fine. But it was actually my anatomy teacher who was like an informal mentor for me, and so that's where I kind of confided in him. I was like, I don't know that this MD thing is really what I want to do, and so she's actually the one that got me a job at the CDC. So I kind of like benefit her for all of this because, acknowledge her part in this, because if it had not been for her, then I wouldn't have been at the CDC. If I wouldn't have been at the CDC, then who knows if I would have ever chosen to go to grad school. So definitely seek out, and I will point that out in my presentation this afternoon, that you should seek out a mentor at all stages, whether it be your advisor from whose lab you're in, or it could be somebody outside. And even prep is good about setting up a mentor system, but I'll share that more in the talk this afternoon, though. I'll talk about it a little more.
Questions? Come on. Sarah, come on. You got a question. It's a great state of Kentucky.
Do you feel like there's a difference between what you focused on in terms of being a successful grad student versus being a successful prep student, or do you feel like your focus?
I think it's pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same. I still want to be passionate about what I'm doing, and I absolutely am. I still, my main focus is to get out those papers, which is really why I work. I live in New York City. Do you know the things I could be doing in New York City? You know what I'm saying? There's so much to be had. Nightlife is great. There's so many cultural events. Do you know what I could be doing in New York City? But yet I'm in the lab on weekends. Like as soon as I get up, I'll go to lab. And then, this is a daily thing. Like some of my friends are in the entertainment industry. They do 9 to 5. So they're all, let's go to this, opening, a red carpet event. I'm like, I can't do that. They're like, what do you mean? Because I would tell them, I'm in the lab. And they're like, what do you mean? You got the weekends off. I'm like, no, you have the weekends off. I'm working. So my ultimate goal is still to publish. Like I mentioned to you earlier that I wanted a paper after my first year of being a postdoc. That was my goal. That will never change. I always want to produce, but I want my work to be quality. And I think that's essentially what's changed, because in grad school it was just published. I had 5 papers, but they weren't high quality. They were quality. Dr. Ming wasn't going to let me put my work somewhere, but they weren't the top of my field. So I'm talking now, I have quality papers that I'm working on now, so it takes a little bit longer, and that's how I put things kind of in perspective. It takes a little longer to get a quality paper. So I want to publish, but I'm not so gung-ho about putting as much out as long as they're quality. But the quality takes a lot more time too, because if you're aiming for something like science or PNAS or nature, they want to see the same thing done 10 different ways. essentially. So I'm like consistently trying to show them what I get them the point, but in 9 other different ways. So quality more. So for successes for me, it's still the same. Of course, I'm passionate about what I'm doing, and of course, I want to publish. It's just that I want the quality of my work to be a little better, and I want to publish in my more high impact journals. And then lastly, I still, at this point, it's no longer thinking independently. I know that I can think independently. I know that I can direct myself, but now it's focusing on trying to figure out what I want to do, because I think that's the last link for me. I know that I feel like I'm a success. I don't need anybody to tell me that I'm not a success, or I don't need anybody to tell me that I'm a success, because to me, I am successful. What I really need is to figure out that last factor, is where do I see myself going from here, and I don't have that yet, but nothing.
But as a prep scholar, your focus was still publishing.
Absolutely. Well, that's not my main focus. My main focus was to learn about viruses. I'm a virologist.
She was talking about as a prep scholar.
But no, I
Yeah.
mean, as a prep scholar, that wasn't my main focus. I really wanted to learn about viruses. I mean, you don't need to publish to learn about viruses. I felt like I wanted to be an expert in virology, the field. So I made sure that I was on top of everything, and the papers were a side product. So publications aren't a requirement for graduating. You don't have to publish. Some people don't even push you to publish. Your goal is to be able to leave grad school being an expert at what you've studied that past 4 or 5 or 6 years. I think that's what the overall goal is. You should be in a position when you graduate to be able to teach to somebody else. If you don't feel like you can teach it, then you're not ready to graduate.
Yeah.
So your goal in prep school is to, in prep, is to get to a PhD program.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all right. The one thing that I thought we need to have you distinguish between is, and so I will always ask our guests this, the difference between, and you said this very strongly, being passionate and hard work. You said you love. So, are they linked in your mind?
Passion, hard work. You can be. I think for me, I guess they are kind of intertwined. I'm really passionate about what I do, and because I want, and I see an end, like I know what result I want, that requires me to work hard. So I guess that they are kind of linked. You could be, but I think people who, and you enjoy what you do. And even though it's hard work, you still enjoy what you do. Like, I don't complain about having to go to work on Saturday or go to work after church on Sunday, because I know that I'm passionate about what I do, and it requires hard work for me to get it done. So I guess you can't distinguish the two, because they come hand in hand.
Well, but I think you can work hard but not be passionate.
Oh, for sure.
And
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
So
there are those
Yeah.
that do that, but I surely wouldn't be working hard for anything that I'm not passionate about. That's just me. So it's true. If I'm not passionate about it, I'm not gonna work hard for it. What am I doing it for? So I think, yeah. But you are right.
Very good. Excellent. Any more questions? Colin, come on, weigh in.
I'm trying to absorb
I
information.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I know you said that you had like a transition that you had to make from high school to undergrad. So what was your biggest challenge during undergrad, and how did you overcome it, whether it be personal or academics or anything?
So the biggest challenge for me in undergrad was maintaining my superstardom. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm serious, because in high school, I thought I was like the big deal, right? Like, I was always the one that had
You have to
the
talk to my
A's.
son.
I was the one that always brought in all the A's. Everybody expected me to be able to be very well-rounded. I mean, I did a lot of stuff in undergrad too. So when I got to undergrad, and I'm already failing, like, it's my first semester, and I'm pulling like a 59. I'm like, what is this? So then, the biggest challenge for me was to change my whole work ethic. Like, I didn't really have to work hard in high school to get that 4.0. I mean, it was I took AP classes and all that jazz, but it wasn't really challenging to me. The grad work that they gave me, the undergrad work, was challenging. It wasn't just spitting out what they give you. You had to really think about things and give it back to them. So in undergrad, it took me a while to adjust to the different teaching styles and a different way of looking at things. so that I could get back to my A's, which I did. It took me, I think I had to retake that class. Oh, I don't even want to discuss it. I'm still a little upset about it. That's the first class that I had to retake to get it wiped off of my record so that I could still have my 4.0 when I actually, it was a 3.98 because, anyway, I'm still upset about that because it was because of that class. And, but for me, it was definitely transitioning to the different ways that you're being taught. In high school is okay, we just want to make sure that you know the information, spit it back to me. But in undergrad, it was okay, we're giving you this information, process it, we want to see how you are understanding it, or if you're understanding it, and then give it back to me in a different type of way. So I definitely had to adjust the way that I thought about things. And I also wanted to make, in undergrad, be sure that I incorporated other aspects that weren't academic. Like I did a lot. I was a double major, actually. I was a Spanish major, and I can't speak a lick of Spanish now. I mean, but I was a double major, so I did a lot of external stuff. Like I did a lot of clubs. I was actually the president of the pre-med club. I did a whole bunch of other stuff, so it was important for me. But you're talking to somebody that was on the pre-med track. So of course, if you want to go to medical school, you have to show somebody that you're pretty well-rounded, right? So I volunteered at the hospital. I did a whole bunch of stuff. So that's what I mean by maintaining my superstar, because I did that in undergrad, and in high school, and I kind of wanted to do that in undergrad as well. But it's harder, it's more challenging. It was more challenging to do that in undergrad because you're in college, and that's time consuming. And but I made it happen, and I still had social life too. So in the end, it worked out. But I think that was just the most challenging. Even when I went to grad school, I had to adapt to the teaching styles here too. So that's always going to be. Was always a consistent factor for me. Turning things around so that I can still be able to maintain my A's wherever I go, or whatever you have. It doesn't have to be an A, but just to make sure that you're happy with the quality of work that you're giving out. So I think that was challenging for me.
Yeah. A big question, don't you?
I actually do have a quick question. So I'm just curious about the timeline as far as your first publication.
Mm-hmm.
If I understood you correctly, it happened during your prep year.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm curious is, did it happen at the end, or was it the fall before you were applying to grad schools, and how you incorporated at least your research in your application, that your publication was coming out, that you would submit a paper by the end of the year? How did that work out?
Okay, so I guess I should preface this by saying that I knew that I wanted to be in Dr. Ming's lab, and so I was kind of working on stuff as if I was going to be staying in his lab. I don't think you guys, I think the prep students, I'm not sure if it's the same, but you're in a lab now, but you don't have to stay in that lab, right? Right? You have the option of going somewhere else. But
We really want them to leave,
I know,
not like
I know.
you.
And I
You
knew
to leave too.
that I wanted to stay in Dr. Ming's lab. So I got into Dr. Ming's lab. He gave me a project, and of course this was in 2005, which was my prep year, and it took me probably about 6 or 7 months to get the data for this that particular project. So by the time summer came, it was submitted. So that's the timeline. I worked. Got into prep into that August of 2005, got all that data together, it was an animal study as well, so by I think January, we rolled in some pigs, did an animal experiment on them, got the data, summarized it, and submitted it. I think it was like June or July or something, and then it was accepted in like August.
And so, but you folks remember though that her individual, she said
Right.
before, she said it was an individual, it's
Yeah.
an individual stuff. She came in without a lot of, she had CDC research experience and had very high grades from, so her interest was different, yeah. So, we thank you.